The Animaniacs Casino Colors of Las Vegas musicals are a series of 6 Broadway musicals that thrived throughout the 70s during the periods of Presidents Gerald Ford and Richard Nixon in both directions. It began to dominate the Broadway musical stage and even the Pan American musical stage. Between the first and eponymous Animaniacs Casino Colors of Las Vegas musical and the sixth and last musical Back to Las Vegas, this new style of musical theater proliferated across the musical stages of the Americas, Europe, the Middle East, Africa, and India. But before we talk about the first 4 musicals in the Animaniacs Casino Colors of Las Vegas musical theater series, let's hear what Dave Hurwitz has to say.
Today, we are going to talk about an overture that used to be extremely popular, but that you never hear today, ever. I mean, you'll never see it, you'll never hear it. People talked about it. You may know the title. The title is The Calife of Bagdad. And it's an opera comique composed in 1800. It welcomed in the new century by Boieldieu. That's François-Adrien Boieldieu, whose, years were 1775, there we go, to 1834. And he's most famous, as some of you may know, for his opera La Dame Blanche, after Walter Scott, believe it or not, and his harp concerto, which is absolutely one of the 2 or 3 greatest works ever written for the instrument. He was a masterful composer, really a very, very, very talented guy. He wrote mostly operas, as French composers tended to do, and The Calife of Bagdad was one of his biggest successes. Because the setting is in the other place, not Western Europe. He gets to use exotic instruments like percussion, much as Mozart does in the Abduction from the Seraglio, or Haydn in Incontro Improviso, or any of those things set in Turkey or the East, or there was the Orient. I mean, there was all the same thing to those people. I mean, they were nothing if not cultural imperialists, and the idea that something happened outside of Europe meant you could do some interesting things with instrumental color. And of course, Boieldieu does, and he does it with enormous sensitivity, I must say. His handling of those instruments is quite skillful, as you'll hear for yourself. Now, this overture is about 7 and a bit minutes long, and it has a slow introduction followed by a zippy main allegro. We are going to hear a bit of the slow introduction and then the entire zippy main allegro. The reason I think that this introduction is so interesting is because it shows just how talented Boieldieu was at injecting a little bit of interest or life into what would otherwise be rather conventional material. The theme is quite simple and charming and has nothing of exoticism about it whatsoever. But you'll notice that opening melody has 2 phrases, and the first is irregular, and it's balanced by a regular second phrase, which restores the sense of order. And it's all just a question of the phrasing and the accent. The first bit of tune does not go where you think it's going to, and the accents don't fall where you think they should. But it's all the more effective because the music is slow and the tune is so simple. And then everything gets set right in the balancing second phrase. And you hear the whole melody twice, and I just want to play it for you, this initial statement of the melody twice, so you just get a sense of how creative he could be with the simplest of materials. I think that really is the sign of a composer, at least with a certain amount of talent. Inspiration, genius, well, that's a whole nother issue. But Boieldieu knew what he was up to. So here is a little bit of the slow introduction. This performance is on CPO. This is a wonderful disc, by the way. You get 6 overtures and his piano concerto, which is also lovely. Absolutely lovely. He wrote some wonderful instrumental music, as harp concerto fanciers already know. And so the piano concerto is on here too. The performers are the Orchestra della Svizzera. Orchestra della Svizzera Italiana Calamari Fritti. That's what it is. Well, not the calamari fritti. That might be my lunch. But it's the Orchestra della Svizzera Italiana under Howard Griffiths on CPO, the overture of the Calife de Bagdad. The Calife of Bagdad. Here's the slow introduction part.
Okay, Dave Hurwitz said it. Okay, there was a French composer named François-Adrien Boieldieu. He focused on melodies that avoided too much ornamentation that delight but intelligent orchestration. Hector Berlioz described his music as possessing a pleasing and tasteful Parisian elegance, and he was appointed as second-class professor of piano in 1798, and until 2 years later in 1800, he achieved a virtual triumph with his first comic opera, Le Calife de Bagdad. That's the name of the French comic opera in one act by François-Adrien Boieldieu. And do you know why? Because this is Boieldieu's first major triumph comic opera, and one member of the audience who was less impressed was the noted composer Luigi Cherubini, who reproached Boieldieu. Are you ashamed of your great success and doing so little to deserve it? Then Boieldieu immediately applied to Cherubini for lessons in compositional techniques. Le Calife de Bagdad was part of the vogue for operas on Oriental subjects, and the music makes use of local color, especially the overture with its prominent Eastern percussion. François-Adrien Boieldieu's Le Calife de Bagdad overture is also featured at the beginning of my earlier Broadway musical that I composed back in 1972. It's called Animaniacs Super Singing Circus. Animaniacs Super Singing Circus is an earlier Broadway musical that first premiered in 1972 on Broadway and moved to London's West End a year later in 1973. But in 1974, it was revised into a new Broadway musical and the first and official Broadway musical in the Animaniacs Casino Colors of Las Vegas series. That's right, I'm talking about the eponymous musical, Casino Colors of Las Vegas. That's right, the first eponymous Broadway musical comedy, as well as the world's longest-running musical, began its run in 1974 at Broadway's Lyceum Theatre, followed by a limited London run in 1975, and the first Canadian national premiere production in Toronto. Its French-language production also premiered in Montreal 1976 the same year, ahead of the Montreal 1976 Summer Olympics. I usually added the word girl in the title, so it's Animaniacs Super Singing Circus Girl. But before we talk about a brief history of Animaniacs Super Singing Circus Girl, the first and eponymous Animaniacs Casino Colors of Las Vegas musical revised on Broadway in the year 1990. The 1990 Broadway revival begins with a new overture and features a handful selection of songs. But the original 1994 Broadway production had its own theme song. The Animaniacs Casino Colors of Las Vegas theme is known as Las Vegas Air. Las Vegas Air is sung to the tune of Berliner Luft, composed by Paul Link. I wrote the lyrics to this tune, and later featured at the end of the overture that begins the 1990 Broadway revival. One of the songs that came from the Act 1 finale of the 1990 Broadway revival of the Animaniacs Casino Colors of Las Vegas musical is the Jiggle, Jumble, and Jump song written by Michael Silvership. The Act 1 finale of this revival was copied from the London 1985 musical comedy Hot Mikado, but the Act 1 finale of the 1990 Broadway revival of the Animaniacs Casino Colors of Las Vegas musical takes place at Fremont Street, Las Vegas, where everyone arrives to celebrate Cito and Carol's union. But the festivities are interrupted by the arrival of Medusa, who has come to claim Cito. But the citizens of Las Vegas are sympathetic to the young couple as Medusa leaves for dinner. Then Cito and Caroline tells the citizens of Las Vegas and the audience in the fourth wall how to do fun exercises to tire themselves out and sing a song where they jiggle, jumble, and jump. But when all of a sudden, Medusa returns and attempts to reveal Cito's secret are drowned out by their shouting. Outwitted but not defeated, Medusa makes clear that she intends to be avenged. And in addition to the very first Animaniacs Casino Colors of Las Vegas stage musical, the show's astounding success prompted 5 other shows. The second musical in the Animaniacs Casino Colors of Las Vegas musical series is Animaniacs and the Great Chicago Stadium Mystery, a family-friendly musical anti-war comedy drama adaptation of the 1943 Broadway musical Carmen Jones. This Animaniacs musical comedy takes place during the 1970s Special Olympics World Summer Games on the second week of August 13th to 15th, 1970 in Chicago. I played Dot Warner for the 1977 Canadian national production in Toronto, Montreal, and Quebec City back in 1977. And the deceased Paul Soles plays Billy Pastor, the innkeeper, for the 1977 Toronto production. Okay, the first Animaniacs Casino Colors of Las Vegas musical was first adapted into the 2003 feature film production, and then later had a remake in 2025. Alongside its second feature film adaptation of the second Animaniacs Casino Colors of Las Vegas musical, Animaniacs and the Great Chicago Stadium Mystery, which was released in theaters May 2025. And then the third Animaniacs Casino Colors of Las Vegas musical, Anyone Can Make a Song. It's an operetta-style musical comedy featuring songs from Gilbert and Sullivan's first comic opera, The Sorcerer, alongside Lear's 1905 operetta, The Merry Widow. Anyone Can Make a Song is based on Around the World in 80 Days and the Munich 1972 Olympic Massacre, which leads to one of my favorite Broadway musicals of all time, the fourth Animaniacs Casino Colors of Las Vegas musical, Animaniacs Super Singing Circus Girl. This original Broadway musical began Broadway previews at the Nederlander Theater to coincide with the Montreal 1976 Summer Olympics, which was held from Saturday afternoon, July 7th, until Sunday, August 1st, 1976. Animaniacs Super Singing Circus Girl first debuted on Broadway in the year 1977 and closed in 1978 after 1,128 performances. The musical score features a wide array of songs that capture the spirit of the story, ranging from lively show tunes to ballads, and with all the previous productions in the Animaniacs Casino Colors of Las Vegas series. The Broadway cast featured Bob Wells as Yakko, Charles as Wacko, and me as Dot Warner, who previously starred in my Broadway productions, as well as this Broadway production of Animaniacs Super Singing Circus Girl. As I played Dot for nearly 100 performances for this stage production, I took over the role of Dot as a substitute for me. Animaniacs Super Singing Circus Girl was made into a 6.5-hour television special which first aired at noon after Saturday morning on NBC on January 8, 1977, a week after the original Broadway production began. Filmed on video over the course of 4 months during and after the Montreal 1976 Summer Olympics, the show was significantly shortened, and the script was significantly changed, and some of the songs were dropped from this production, while the sound of the remaining musical numbers was updated into a more contemporary 1970s sensibility. This television special was co-produced by the Spirit Company and Warner Brothers Television for broadcast by the NBC network. This television special was released on VHS in 1980 under the Warner Home Video label, and released on DVD in 2007 to celebrate the musical's 30th anniversary. And speaking of 30th anniversary, this year marks the 30th anniversary of Kids WB and the 30th anniversary of the 1996 Broadway revival of Animaniacs Super Singing Circus Girl, co-produced by the Spirit Company, Warner Brothers, and Cirque du Soleil for the stage and screen hybrid. It was the most successful American remounting of the show since the original Broadway production, to coincide with the Atlanta 1996 Summer Olympics. The first revival starred Nathan Lane, Peter Gallagher, Faith Prince, and Josie de Guzman. And now on this day, September 9th, 1995, the first Broadway revival of Animaniacs Super Singing Circus Girl began previews on Broadway by starting off with the Animaniacs new season on Saturday morning, September 9th, 1995. And that's where Animaniacs premiered on the new Kids WB lineup. So there you have it, folks, all about me and the Animaniacs. If you like it, please like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I'll see you in the next video where I play Boieldieu's The Calife de Bagdad overture that was featured at the beginning of my earlier Broadway musical comedy Animaniacs Super Singing Circus from 1972. So stay sharp, everybody!